So I come from a company called Hedtek. I've been asked to talk about open source and SMEs and models which will be used by SMEs. So I thought rather than talk in the abstract, I'd try and tie it to reality, what we do and the kinds of things, people we are, and how we use open source. So we're 5 developers. We like to work incredibly closely with clients, being open with clients to achieve their aims. We deliver solutions for the web and for mobile. We use open source products heavily in that process, and we contribute open source back to the community. In terms of recent work, we have recently done a very major and deep technical overhaul of an open educational resources repository. Those are open educational resources which can be used freely, without constraint, Creative Commons licensed. This involved a huge amount of user interface redesign, increased interactivity, more functionality, and greater navigability through the repository. We started with something which looked like this. This is a search results page. It's crowded. You can't see what you want to find. You can't see descriptions. You can't navigate easily from here apart from to particular resources. And we ended up with something which looked a whole lot cleaner, with greater navigability skills. You can click on anything which is blue, browse around. And there are various other features in this particular prototype. It's not live yet. It will be soon, we hope. So what happened in that particular job was that an open source repository underpinned the operation of this repository, Jorum, was accessed via a browser. We came in and did heavy modifications to an application program interface, an API, in order to build a new user interface component for display in the browser. And once we'd done that, we contributed this code back to the community. It was a very intense Java job to do that. This was developed in Ruby and Rails with some code running in the browser. So by and large, this is fairly typical of our work. For example, we're building a learning support product at the moment. It's very interactive. It uses huge amounts of JavaScript, which actually is an open standard rather than being open source, but it uses other open source products, the Rails framework, Ember.js, which is a funky kind of JavaScript, similarly for Meteor, and the Bootstrap CSS framework. And it would be impossible for us to operate without open source products. So typically, when SMEs use open source, they are interested in using open source as components in a larger system, or as complete products. For example, the components might be something from a simple framework, like Bootstrap that I talked about before, or to a hugely scalable system, for example, Hadoop. You can use Hadoop to implement something very similar to Google, if you chose to and if you had the resources to. For complete products, often we find SMEs using things like content management systems, Drupal, Joomla, that kind of stuff. In the educational sector, Moodle is a very popular open source product, a learning support environment. Sometimes SMEs contribute open source back to the community. This is often as a result of funded work, as in our example earlier. Sometimes it's a spin-off of the SME's own work. So here, for example, we're contributing things called Ruby Gems back to the community. These have proved to be popular. In 2 or 3 months, we've had almost 3,000 downloads. Sometimes SMEs will contribute code to the community in order to create a revenue stream. So therefore, they might write a system and say, right, here's a system, you can use it for free, but if you want to have us perform maintenance for you, or extensions, or help you do with installations, you can come to us and we'll work with our own code for a particular fee. That's just one model. There are several models of open sourcing stuff in order to create a revenue stream. And sometimes people are purely altruistic. in contributing open source. So here on the right is a system called WikiQuals, which is intended for people to provide information about how they can, about the training and learning which they have given themselves. So it's something for self-directed learning where you can list a whole bunch of evidence about what you've done on the web and point off to where this evidence is. It points to the decline of formal education at tertiary level. Hedtek also consult on diverse topics, and we tend to use Creative Commons as a way of licensing our outputs. So I motored through that because I really like the next 3 slides. Exploring ideas for the heritage sector and what could be open. Crowdsourcing, where you get information from loads of people and concentrate it to illuminate a particular topic, is becoming quite popular these days. I was recently in an AHRC workshop for 2 days exploring crowdsourcing in the arts. I've got a particular interest in this because I've recently become the temporary curator of a whole bunch of historical artifacts to do with computer science, not only to do with the first stored program computer, which was built at Manchester University, but also with the later computers. This is a very significant one called Atlas. Its 50th birthday is coming up at the end of the year. The problem with this is that I'm looking after a room which is chock-a-block full of pieces of equipment, drawings, and other artifacts from about 30 to 50 years ago. And the people who know about this are 70 or 80 at this particular point in time. No one of those gentlemen, and they are mostly gentlemen, I'm afraid, is going to spend a lot of time describing these artifacts. But if we can post photographs of them and then provide underneath the photographs discussion facilities, many of them will be tempted to add information, which we then will be able to extract into a description of the artifact. So that's a little crowdsourced system which we are going to build and open source in the very near future. Luckily, there's not a lot of work involved in that. It is, in fact, very related to this particular system over here, one of a family of small specialist repository-type applications. And the other thing which is interesting to us is this idea of geolocation. And I was glad that the speaker, one before the last speaker, talked about geolocation. That was in the context of churches. Here we're using a little system that we hacked up about 3 years ago now, where we could combine a Google map and places of interest. The cameras indicate what might be loosely called heritage sites. People could visit them. They could use an iPhone with augmented reality facilities on it, so that you point the iPhone and see a picture on the screen of whatever you're pointing it at. But off in the distance, and you can see this very faintly over here, better actually on a real device than this bad photograph. It's the only photograph we have of the system. You get tweets which people have made about these particular places. Oh, I was in the Manchester Museum and I saw some fantastic Egyptian artifacts from 2000 BC or whatever. I was particularly interested in da-di-da-di-da. This need not only be used outdoors. A recent news item is that Google Maps has started doing indoors as well in this country. That's typically done with specialized pieces of networking kit from people like Cisco. But we are now at a stage where we can build maps of particular museums and have someone go around the museum and not only see as they approach a particular artifact, information about that artifact, but things that other people have said as well. So in fact, it brings us very much back to this idea of crowdsourcing. So what's open about this? Well, In a crowdsourced repository, the information would be open. You'd have to have people contributing under a particular license. The information would be open. You should ensure that the metadata is open. The code for the repository could be open source and will be in our particular case. So there are three things which are open there. What might be open in this particular situation? Well, the particular mapping technology here has APIs which can be used, but it's not open. However, there are open source mapping technologies. Twitter, again, is a closed system only accessed by APIs. Again, there are replacements for Twitter if you choose to use them. You could build the system without any kind of 140 character length, which is a bit short for most of us. You could build this with a back end which solicited comments which were much longer than that. And again, the code for this could be open. You could see this being used in cities across the UK. For example, I'm down by the dockfront in Liverpool, and I'm running this system, and I get to see what all the old buildings are, get to find the Tate Gallery, and so on, and so on. And that's basically it. I've motored through this. We're just before lunch. You don't want to hear me droning on forever, do you? Mm-hmm. And we are Hedtek. I am Mark van Harmelen. That is how you contact me.
Thank you very much.
Questions?